assume I'm good. Again, I'm Christine Brown. I am really excited to be here today and talk a little bit about habits of highly effective product managers. I have been a product manager we're in product management for about 10 years now. I started in the education space. I spent some time in California working at a startup called Urban Sitter, which is a marketplace for parents and babysitters to connect. Incidentally, that's where I met Carlos and when I got involved with product school. And then I've now been back on the East Coast for about 2 years, and I'm currently at Exo Group and work on the Knots vendor marketplace for our weddings. So where we connect couples with the pros that are going to help them bring their weddings to life. All right, let me see which version of this I have. Great. So we're going to talk a little bit about habits of highly effective product managers. I made a quick change to a slide. I wasn't sure if it would make it. It didn't. That's fine. First, I thought we would just define a little bit what a habit is and how a habit is distinct from skills and why habits are important, right? So habits are things, at least in my mind, that have become innate, right? It's a response to some sort of stimulus. So a habit might be this thing happens and I do this. I wake up in the morning and I do this. It becomes just a learned response that when this happens, you take this action or you act in this way. That is distinct from skills, right? So we talk a lot about skill development and professional development. Those are really important, and the point here is not to push skills to the side, but to take a few steps back and just think about the power that habits can have in your daily life and specifically in your life as a product manager. So some skills, I'm going to sort of walk through and compare and contrast what I mean by skills versus habits. A skill of a highly effective product manager might be that you ship a lot, right? You're able to work with your teams, velocity is high, and you get products out the door with frequency, right? That's a skill or that's an output. That's not a habit. That's not what we're going to talk about. User stories, specs, that's another skill that effective product managers tend to have, right? You need to be able to document at an appropriate level of fidelity for whatever team you're working with. But that's not really a habit, and that's not necessarily, you could be good at that, but that doesn't always translate to being truly effective. User science, user research, user testing, conducting user interviews. Again, this is a really important thing for you to have in your toolkit, but it doesn't always transfer to efficacy and to outcomes, which is what we're after as product managers. Data. I don't know if anybody's talking about data analytics today. I know one of our partners is Mixpanel. Data is important. Being fluent in data, whatever your data set is at your company, making sure that you're always able to know what the score is. How are we going to tell if this was effective or if this was not effective? But that's a skill. That's not a habit. This is my favorite. I always like to try to incorporate some sort of animal into any presentation. Anybody who's been a product manager is, I would imagine, familiar with the feeling of like playing whack-a-mole sometimes. Like things crop up from all sorts of different places. You've got customer support issues coming in. You've got stakeholders from all different functional areas like coming at you with ideas, things to fix, et cetera. Just being in that reactive place and sort of responding to the things around you does not necessarily translate to being effective or being successful as a product manager. So what is effective and what are some of the things that do translate? So when we talk about being effective, I think it's really important to distill it down to what we're trying to accomplish as product managers. And there really isn't a magic formula, right? Product is interesting because it's a little bit of a different flavor at every company, at every industry. PM at one place doesn't always translate exactly to PM at the other place. And it's also almost a little bit of overhead, right? Stay with me. You could argue that if you took PMs out of the equation, companies would still exist, right? In fact, companies did exist for quite a long time in many cases without product managers. You'd have sales, marketing, biz dev, audience development filling the top of the funnel. You've got designers who are capable of designing beautiful things, interviewing customers, creating prototypes, et cetera. You've got engineers, right, who actually build the thing that's going to go out there. And product, where does product fit in? In my opinion, and in my experience, cutting across all different industries and all different types of product manager roles, it really boils down to how do you add value? and how do you stay laser focused on figuring out what is valuable for your customer and what is valuable for your business. And I'm going to talk about some habits that I have seen both in my experience and then in working with the people that I've mentored and worked with over the years, kind of cut across different industries, different types of companies in terms of the habits that you can cultivate, no matter what your specific job description looks like, no matter what industry you're in at the moment, things that you can work on that will translate to adding value and ultimately being really, really effective as a product manager. 7, it started with 3, then we became 7 because it's kind of cute with the book. I could do 50, I could do 10. 7 seemed like a nice round number. I also, again, tried to pick habits that I believe are extensible and sort of universal, no matter what industry you're in, and then also no matter where you are in your career. So whether you're just thinking about kind of dipping your toe into product management, whether you have your first job as an associate product manager, whether you're moving up and going to become a senior PM or a director of product management somewhere. These are habits that I do believe are really tightly correlated with people who are successful and effective as PMs. All right, habit number 1, love your users. I have a friend from XO Group in the back who's smiling. We talk a lot about loving your users at XO Group. And anybody who's talked about or thought about product management has probably heard or talked about the concept of being really user-focused. What I want to do is just like articulate what it means to cultivate the habit of really loving your user. Step 1 to loving your user is to actually get to know your user, right? And you don't get to know your user by just reading one set of survey results or looking at some user tests or reading some demographic information or even just watching them use your product. You get to know your user by doing that over and over and over again and taking every opportunity possible to connect with and understand who the users of your product are. Only once you know your users can you framework your product decisions in a way that is truly loving them and putting them first. I'm going to share an example of when I think about sort of cultivating the habit of loving your users or how that factors into my product thinking every day. So I work at The Knot, which is a big wedding website and planning tools suite. And I specifically focus on the marketplace. And so for us, the marketplace has wedding vendors on one side, so the pros, and then we have couples. The pros are where our revenue is tied to, right? So when we talk about our ability to grow our business and our ability to make money, it's very tightly correlated to the success of our pros. One of the ways that our pros make decisions about whether or not they're getting a good ROI is by looking at leads, right? What's their reach? How many people are they getting in touch with? How many couples are actually reaching out to them? I could, if I were not thinking about both of my users, make decisions about what might be good for the pros in the sense that I could make product decisions that would drive leads, right? Just drive leads. Doesn't matter what's happening with the couples, but just drive leads. That would not be focusing on or really loving the other side of the marketplace, the couple user, right? Because those decisions might not be in the best interest of the couple. So the magic starts to happen when you can figure out what the pain points are for your user, identify where those overlap with the pain points or opportunities for your business, and then prioritize those projects or those features as part of your product development process. So taking the time to get to know your user and then connecting that to the decisions you make every day about whether it's new feature development, whether it's fixing a bug, whether it's working with stakeholders from across the organization, really cultivating this habit can help you level up as a product manager. Habit number 2. As a product manager, focus on the what and the why and less of the how. Not to say that you won't ever get into the weeds of here's how we're actually going to implement this, or you won't get into a situation where you're sort of refereeing or moderating a decision between 2 engineering leads, for example. But as a product manager, your job is to stay squarely in the space and make the time for staying in the space of what is the problem that we need to solve, and why is it important? How does it connect to what we're trying to do? How does it solve a problem for our user? How does it solve a problem for your business? you have to trust and work effectively with your engineering partners and with your design partners that they will come up with a solution, right? And every org is a tiny bit different. Tech leads are a little different. Engineering leads or designers are a little bit different in terms of what sits in product, what sits where. But generally, it's the engineers and the designers who need to be trusted with the responsibility of figuring out like, what is the solution? What is the thing that's going to solve this problem that you as the product manager have articulated as being important to solve? If you find yourself too far in the weeds too often, too focused on the how too often, chances are the first thing that's going to go is your ability to put mental energy toward the what and the why. And again, that can really erode your effectiveness and start to get you in the cat whack-a-mole place where you're just like firefighting and not stepping back and thinking it strategically. So making it a habit to kind of check yourself, think about how much time you're spending on what thing, and make sure that you've carved out the time and the space for really thinking deeply about the what and the why, and trust your partners to focus on the how. All right, next habit. Investing in your relationship. So anytime you talk to somebody about what makes a great product manager, one of the first skills that comes up is communication, right? You've got to be kick-ass at communication. You have to be able to speak effectively. You have to be able to write effectively. You have to be able to Slack effectively. You also have to be able to toggle back and forth among lots of different types of people, right? So be comfortable communicating in many different ways. That's all true. Those are skills. The habit that I believe is tightly correlated to being an effective and skilled communicator is taking the time to invest in the relationships with the people that you work with. So part of your ability to be effective at communicating and thinking about, I'm trying to get this message across to my tech lead or my engineering lead, or I need to have this tough conversation with the head of sales, and it's going to be tricky. How do I navigate that? Or even just trying to get another product team to work on something that you have a dependency on their team. You need them to kind of pull something up for you. Your ability to facilitate those conversations effectively and communicate effectively is in many ways going to be correlated to how strong your relationships are with people. I will be transparent. This is something that is very difficult for me, and so I can say with confidence that it makes a difference when you make the time for it and you make it a habit. It doesn't always have to be going to networking events or super heavyweight, time-consuming things. It can be as simple as taking the time to understand somebody's perspective, understanding who they are as a person outside of work. What makes them really excited? What makes them really sad? What battle are they fighting, whether it's at work or outside of work? And just that kind of investment in emotional intelligence and building the habit of taking the time to really, really cultivate your relationships within your direct teams and then certainly with your key stakeholders is really important, and it can be really, really powerful. All right. 2 slides for habit number 4. Be decisive, right? But also be really flexible. So many of you have probably heard the sort of strong opinions loosely held statement, which is really common when you hear people talk about one of the traits of a good product manager is that you both have a really strong opinion that's backed up by data that is reasonable. But you're flexible. Those opinions are loosely held, and you're willing to have a conversation or negotiate to get something done. And so I think one of the ways that this translates from a habit perspective is thinking about in terms of being decisive. Make decisions. It's okay to make decisions. Part of your job as a product manager is to make decisions, and you might not always have every single data point that you could possibly want that would inform that decision. But if you're like 60%, 70%, 80% sure, particularly if that decision is sort of a two-way door, right? If you're wrong, do something different, you're going to learn from it. Have the confidence to make those decisions. On the flip side, don't be a total ass about it, right? If somebody comes and has a competing point of view or has a data point that frankly you missed, because that happens, we would love to pretend that it doesn't, but it totally happens. Be flexible, be willing to hear them, be willing to sort of understand and ask, and change your mind. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, 2 weeks ago, I would have bet my life on this thing, made a set of decisions, and you know what, I have info now that I did not have 2 weeks ago. I was wrong. This is what we learned. Here's where we are now. And let's keep moving forward with a focus on working on the right things, solving the right problems, and adding value for your users and ultimately for the business. All right, habit number 5, really be curious, right? This is sort of building off of the last one and that willingness to be flexible. A lot of people who are attracted to product management, I find, already have this habit in many ways. Y'all are all here today, so you're taking time out of your busy schedules. You've got some of this curiosity, but really taking the time to, again, not just get caught in the kind of day-to-day execution or delivery of things, but being curious about your industry, being curious about not just your users, but the internal stakeholders. What does your sales team do all day? When they're talking to customers, what are the objections that they get? What are the things that make it hard for them to do their jobs? Customer support's another great example. Like, what are the things that they hear about constantly from your users? What's the technology that's relevant to your industry that might be coming down the pike? You don't have to be an engineer to be curious about what's coming next in technology. So taking the time to be curious and ask the why and understand whether it's perspective, whether it's something new, not being afraid that it's new or different or that you don't necessarily know the answer. I struggled with this when I was a new PM. I think there's a feeling sometimes that you, as the PM, people are looking to you to make decisions, be decisive, make sure stuff gets done, and there can be this feeling of, oh my gosh, should I just know everything in order to do all of these things? You should not know everything. Nobody knows everything. And the faster you can kind of get right with and get confident with asking why and being curious about what's going on around you, faster that's going to translate to success and efficacy as a product manager. All right, we're almost there. Habit number 6. This is my favorite. You have to embrace saying no, right? This doesn't mean be like completely negative. I'm always saying no all the time. Nope, can't possibly do that. Nope, can't possibly do that. As a product manager, though, you need to get in the habit of, to the point of the last slide, being curious. When somebody comes in and says, we have to build this thing, I want to build this thing, we got to build this feature, ship this feature, take the time to ask why, and if it's not right, have the discipline and the confidence to say no. So much of our job is taking the time to understand the customer, understand the business, know and really have a perspective about what's going to add the most value, and then make decisions every day that will allow you, and more importantly, allow your team kind of the air cover to execute on that vision and those decisions. And saying no is really, really important. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that saying no elegantly is also important. You're not going to be super effective if you're just like, nope, 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 not going to do it, nope. Your job is to say no and get the person that you have just said no to on board and excited about why you have told them no, right? No, we're not going to do that thing because we're doing this and this and this and this, and here is why this and this and this and this is actually better for you in the long run, and aren't you glad that I just told you no, because it wouldn't ultimately be the best thing for anybody involved. It's hard, but it's really important. One other just side note, I feel like a lot of people who get into product management do it because we like to solve problems and we fundamentally like to make people happy. Right? That's part of the reason I'm a product manager. I really love solving problems. I like to think that I'm curious. I love putting cool things in the hands of our users. I love adding value to the business. And I like to make people happy. And so sometimes part of being a PM that really, really is tough is you cannot make everybody happy all of the time. But if you try to make everybody happy all of the time, you will make nobody happy ever. And so the more you can kind of exercise this and cultivate that habit of like, it's okay to say no, the better. All right, last habit. This is one that I thought a little bit about how to articulate this, and is it a habit, is it not a habit? I'm going to go with it. I think it's a habit. The way I've landed on describing it is cultivating your grit. So product management is really, really difficult. And the product managers that I see be most effective, and when I've frankly felt most effective or most successful, is when I have made it a habit to carve out the time to think strategically and to make sure that I'm sort of fostering my tenacity a little bit and not getting frustrated or beaten down when things get tough. Stuff's going to be hard. You're going to have a dependency on some other team, or you're going to have to, work through a really tricky implementation problem, or you're going to be wrong, right? We're wrong a lot. Fundamentally, part of the reason we ship things and test things is that that's the best way to learn. And so your ability to take those obstacles or challenges or setbacks and turn them not into things that are like crushing and make everything not worth it, but translate them into things that actually can inform your thinking moving forward and become something positive. This is really, really powerful and really key. So I think in summary, I've shared a handful of habits. Again, I could keep going, I could talk longer. There's a lot of things, both habits and skills, that go into being effective as a product manager. Fundamentally, though, our job is to add value and get stuff done, right? Using the politically correct word. And as a PM, as you're thinking about your career path and your kind of professional development roadmap, I love that term, you can be thinking not just about the skills that you need to build, because those exist, my list is long, right? But also, what are the habits that you can be trying to foster and trying to build as a product manager that will ultimately translate to more effectiveness in your job? That's all I got.